Father's Day came, and my daughter surprised her father-in-law with a brand new car worth $50,000. Then she turned to me and told me I had until Sunday to pay her mortgage. I remember asking if she had at least gotten me a small gift. Her cold, flat no hit harder than I expected. It erased years of sacrifice in one syllable. That night, I left a note on the counter and walked out of the house. The next morning, my phone showed 63 missed calls. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. I dropped the Civil War history book I had been reading, the hardback thudding against the floor as my reading glasses slid down my nose. My heart pounded against my chest like it was trying to escape. Diana never bothered to knock anymore. She stood there in the doorway, arms folded tight, her shadow stretching across the little guest room that had become my whole world. The light from the hallway turned her face into a dark outline, but her voice carried all the warmth of a January morning in Nebraska. "Dad, you remember the mortgage is due Monday, right?" Every word came out sharp and cold. "If not," she added, "I know a really nice nursing home." The book lay open between us, pages bent and fanned out like broken wings. My eyes landed on the chapter title, When Families Divide. I looked up at her, the same daughter who once crawled into my lap during thunderstorms. "Diana," I said quietly, "I always pay on time." My voice cracked like an old porch board. She just said, "That's cruel." "No," she corrected herself. "That's reality." Her heels clicked against the hardwood as she shifted her stance, her polished confidence filling the room. "We have obligations, real ones." I gripped the bedsheet until my hands trembled. 67 years of living had taught me plenty, but nothing prepared me for the moment when my own child would talk to me like a burden, something that needed managing. "I've never once been late with—" I started, but she waved her hand, slicing through my words like smoke. "Dad, please," she said. "Just make sure Monday happens." The room suddenly felt smaller, the air pressing in. The framed portraits of Civil War generals on the wall seemed to watch silently. Men who knew betrayal and what it meant to be blindsided by your own allies, but even they looked like they pitied me. "I understand you're stressed, sweetheart, but don't," she said sharply. Just one word, but it hit harder than any slap. "Do not make this harder than it needs to be." She turned, her blonde hair swaying like a curtain closing on a scene I never agreed to watch. Her heels clacked in rhythm as she walked down the hallway, each click a reminder of how far she had drifted. The sound faded as she climbed the stairs back to Brandon and their world of wine and television. I sat there in the quiet, the lamp casting a soft yellow glow over my chair. The house groaned, settling into its old bones. Above me, their laughter floated down. Light, careless laughter that belonged to people who never worried about rent or food or dignity. My Civil War book still lay open on the floor. I bent down, my joints protesting, and picked it up. The chapter stared back at me. When brothers turn against brothers. The words tasted bitter now. I smoothed the wrinkled pages with shaky hands. The author had written about families torn apart by war, sons turning on fathers, daughters choosing sides. Back then, those stories felt like history lessons. Now they felt personal. The framed picture of Virginia sat on my nightstand, her smile captured forever in silver. She had been gone 5 years, but I still talked to her sometimes, still asked for advice. Tonight, her eyes seemed to ask a question I could not bring myself to answer. I set the book aside and lifted her picture. The metal frame felt cool and steady in my palm, the weight familiar and grounding. There she was, Virginia in her Sunday dress, that patient smile that carried me through 43 years of marriage, 3 miscarriages, and 1 beautiful daughter. One daughter who had just threatened to put me in a nursing home. My vision blurred. I blinked fast, refusing to let the tears fall. Men my age were not supposed to cry, especially not over their own children. But as I held that picture, memories flooded back to when life still felt hopeful. The year was 2023, and that same photo took me straight to the Sunday afternoon when everything began to change. Diana had been right here in this very room, though back then it was her kitchen, bright and full of warmth, smelling like pot roast and dreams. "Dad, it will be perfect," she had said, her eyes shining the same way they used to when she was 7 and begging for a puppy. "We will be one big family." I had wrapped both hands around my coffee mug, studying her face for any sign of hesitation. Are you sure? I do not want to be in anyone's way. In the way? She had laughed, really laughed, like I had told the best joke in the world. You are joking. We have dreamed about this. Brandon, her husband, nodded from across the table, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. It makes perfect sense, Raymond. Why should you stay alone in that big house? The big house. Our house, mine and Virginia's. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, the kitchen where she had baked Christmas cookies for 30 straight years. The living room was where Diana had taken her first wobbly steps. The master bedroom, the same room where Virginia had taken her final breath. That day, as I watched my daughter's face glow with what I thought was real happiness, something inside me stirred, something I had not felt since the day we buried Virginia. Hope. Hope that maybe I would not have to spend the rest of my life talking to walls and eating frozen dinners alone at the kitchen table. Just think about it, Dad, Diana had said, her hand covering mine, soft and sure. No more mowing the lawn, no more shoveling snow, no more rattling around that big empty house by yourself. The real estate papers lay between us, crisp and clean, black ink spelling out what 4 decades of work and memories were now worth, $180,000. Enough for Diana's down payment, enough for her dream home. Enough, I thought, to buy my way back into her life. That last night in our old house, I sat on the edge of my bed, surrounded by cardboard boxes labeled Raymond's Room in Diana's careful handwriting. The silver frame with Virginia's photo was the final thing I packed. I wrapped it gently in tissue paper, like a promise I was trying to keep to both of us. We are doing the right thing, aren't we, sweetheart? I whispered to her face behind the glass. Moving day had felt almost joyful. Diana and Brandon carried boxes, laughing and teasing each other. For the first time in a long time, the silence that had filled my life was gone. My new room, the guest room, had been painted a pale blue, Virginia's favorite shade. Diana herself had hung my Civil War prints. She stood on a stepladder while I steadied the frames. Perfect, she said proudly when she stepped back. This is going to be perfect, Dad. And for a while, she was right. We had dinner together every evening, the conversation flowing easy, like wine. Diana asked about my day, the book I was reading, or reminded me of stories from when she was a kid. Brandon would chime in about the news, politics, or baseball, and sometimes he even asked what I thought. For the first time in years, I felt useful again. Wanted. That first month was everything she promised. I woke up to the smell of coffee brewing and voices in the kitchen. The house had life in it again. In the evenings, we would watch movies, share popcorn, and argue about which ending made more sense, like the family I thought I had lost forever. I can still recall the moment I believed I had made the right choice. It was 3 weeks after I moved in. Diana knocked softly on my door, actually knocked, and asked if I wanted to help plant tulip bulbs out front. For spring, she said, with dirt already under her fingernails, something to look forward to. We spent that afternoon together under a warm October sun, talking about colors and bloom times. I felt like a father again, not just an old man taking up space in someone else's home. But tonight, sitting in that same room with Virginia's photo in my hands, I realized those tulip bulbs were still buried out there, waiting for spring that might never come. I could not remember the last time Diana had knocked on my door, or the last time she had asked me anything beyond how I wanted my eggs cooked. The silver frame caught the lamp's glow, Virginia's smile flickering like a reflection in water. I brushed my thumb over the metal and whispered to the empty room, "When did that smile fade?" I moved to my armchair by the window to clear my head. Outside, the neighborhood lay quiet, every porch light guarding its own secrets. But I knew tomorrow something would change. I could feel it deep in my bones, the same way I could always sense a storm coming. The question haunted me. When did the smile stop? January 2024. That is when the cracks first started showing. It began small, with Brandon's greetings. For months, he had passed through the kitchen each morning with a cheerful, "Good morning, Raymond," coffee in one hand, laptop bag in the other. Then one Tuesday, it stopped. I was at the counter fixing my oatmeal when he breezed by like I was part of the furniture. "Morning," I said, hoping he just had not heard. Nothing, not even a nod. I told myself he was just busy. Maybe work had him stressed, maybe a project deadline. But the silence stretched on. Days, then weeks. Every kitchen encounter became an awkward dance. Me pretending everything was normal, him pretending I was invisible. The dinner table told the real truth. For months, we had eaten together every night, sharing stories about our days. Diana called them family dinners. But gradually, the chairs around me emptied. First, they skipped once a week, then every other night. Then it became every night. We ate earlier, Diana would explain when I asked, her tone light, almost apologetic. We did not want to disturb your reading time. But I could hear them, laughing together in the kitchen while I sat in the dark, microwaving my leftovers. Their voices carried through the walls like a party I was no longer invited to. By February, I started hearing whispers. Doors would click shut when I walked past. I would catch my name spoken in low tones, followed by silence the second they realized I was there. One night I heard Brandon say, "Too expensive to keep," before he saw me standing in the hall. "Hey, Raymond," he said quickly, too bright, too forced. "How's the book coming along?" By March, the complaints began, small ones at first. "Dad, could you turn the television down a bit?" Diana asked one evening, like I had been blasting it through the roof, when the volume was barely audible. Later that week, I overheard Brandon's voice from the kitchen. "Your father always leaves dishes in the sink." I started cleaning my own dishes right after every meal. One bowl, one spoon, washed, dried, and put away before anyone could say a word. But soon enough, they found something new to criticize. "Maybe we need some house rules," Brandon had said one night in March, using that firm, managerial tone of his, the kind people use when talking to a difficult tenant. House rules. In a home my money had helped pay for. That was when I started noticing how my world was shrinking piece by piece. My toothbrush and razor were moved out of the bathroom cabinet to make space for guest supplies. My favorite chair in the living room slowly disappeared under their things. Diana's laptop, magazines, decorative pillows, all piled like I did not exist. The kitchen cabinets were rearranged without a word, and somehow my coffee and cereal ended up on the highest shelf out of reach of my bedrooms. Once a refuge, had turned into a cell with a window. Days started blending together. I would stay in that room from sunrise to nightfall, stepping out only to grab food or use the bathroom. The house that had once felt like a second chance now felt like walking through enemy territory. And the worst part was not their coldness. It was what it was doing to me. I started tiptoeing around them, careful with every word, every breath. I spoke softer, moved slower, tried to take up less space, hoping it would earn back their kindness. But somewhere along the way, I had stopped being family and become a problem that needed managing. It had not happened overnight. It crept in quietly, one reasonable change at a time. The television volume, the dishes, the bathroom schedule, even how I moved around the house. Each new rule sounded small on its own, but together they built a cage I had helped pay for. I kept telling myself that if I just followed along, peace would return. But it never did. All it did was erase me from their world, until I was invisible, yet still painfully there. 3 months. That is all it took for my daughter's dream house to become my nightmare. That evening, I heard an engine outside. The sound cut through my thoughts like a blade. Strange. Diana's Toyota was already parked in the driveway, and Brandon's truck sat beside it. I pulled the curtain back and stared into the fading light. Something told me tomorrow would bring answers I was not ready to face. The first thing that caught my eye was the shine, a flash of silver bright enough to sting. I had stepped outside to grab the mail after 3 days of keeping to myself since the nursing home argument, but I froze halfway down the path. Sitting in our driveway was a BMW X3. Brand new. Silver paint gleaming, dealer tags still attached like jewelry price tags. It blocked my usual path to the mailbox, so I had to walk around it just to pick up the electric bill and grocery flyers. $50,000. The number repeated itself in my mind while my hand traced the car's smooth hood. I knew cars. 4 decades in construction meant plenty of lunch breaks with guys arguing about engines and payments. "Whose car is this?" I muttered, not expecting an answer. The front door opened before I could finish the thought. Diana came out first, Brandon right behind her. They both wore that same proud look I remembered from when she brought home perfect report cards. "Ours?" Brandon said, chest puffed out like he had just made vice president. "A BMW X3. $50,000. Every feature, every upgrade. The mail slipped from my hands, letters scattering across the driveway. I bent down slowly, my knees screaming, and picked them up while my mind started doing math. Interest rates, mortgage totals, what 18 months of payments looked like. Wouldn't it have made more sense to put that money toward the mortgage? I asked quietly, trying to keep my tone gentle. It was not criticism, just concern from someone who still cared. Diana's face changed instantly. The pride drained away, replaced by that cold, businesslike stare I had come to know too well. "Dad," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut, "don't interfere in our business." Brandon slipped his arm around her shoulders, both of them standing together like a team against the outsider. "I am not interfering," I said, holding the scattered mail to my chest. "I am just concerned." "Concerned about what?" Brandon snapped, stepping closer. "We are adults, Raymond. We can handle our own finances." Their finances, built on the sale of my house, sustained by the money I sent every month for their mortgage. I stepped back without thinking, an old reflex from too many quiet retreats. "Of course," I said evenly. "It's a beautiful car." The words hung there, empty and heavy. Diana smiled again, pleased to have the last word, while Brandon kept studying me. Guarded. Territorial. "We deserve nice things," she said, running her hand along the side mirror. "We work hard." They did work, but they also worked with a safety net I had built for them. My sacrifices had turned into their luxuries, German leather seats, while I patched old shirts and stretched a can of coffee to the end of the week. "I'm sure you do," I said quietly. That was the end of it. The air felt colder after that. They turned and went back inside, probably to look at their reflection in the new car's window. And I stood there alone in the driveway, surrounded by silence and the sound of my own foolish heart still trying to believe I mattered. I walked toward the front door with the mail clutched tight in my shaking hands, but my mind wasn't on the envelopes. It was on the numbers. $50,000. 18 months of mortgage payments, half a year's worth of my pension, all spent on luxury, while they threatened me with nursing homes. I bent down to pick up the envelopes scattered across the walkway, still running the math in my head. By the time I made it back inside, those numbers were carved into my thoughts like scratches in glass. That night, around 8:30, I sat at my small desk by the window. The lamp threw a weak yellow light over the bank statements spread out in front of me like evidence at a trial. I had tried to distract myself earlier, watched a little television, reheated last night's leftovers while they ate Chinese takeout upstairs. But the math kept circling back, eating at me. My glasses slipped down my nose as I arranged the paperwork in neat stacks, oldest to newest. Old habits die hard. I had been an engineer most of my life. Organization and accuracy were second nature. 6 months of mortgage payments, everyone carefully documented in my handwriting. $2,800 each month. That came from my $2,100 pension and another $700 I scraped together from my savings, which were shrinking fast. Next to my coffee mug sat the calculator, its little digital screen glowing with the harsh truth. My old house had sold for $180,000, money I used to give Diana and Brandon their down payment. Add 6 months of contributions to their mortgage, about $1,600 more. In total, I had poured $196,800 into their dream. That new car of theirs? The payments alone could have covered my groceries for 2 full years. I pulled my small notebook from the drawer, the one where I tracked every cent. Groceries, $20 a week. Stretching ground beef and pasta into 3-day meals. Coffee, $5, one small bag each month. My winter coat was held together with safety pins because $30 for a new one felt extravagant when they needed my help with the mortgage. While I went without, they spent $50,000 on German luxury. Through the window, the BMW glowed under the streetlight like a trophy. I stared at it, remembering how I had sold my own Toyota 3 months earlier. I'd told myself it made sense. One household didn't need 2 cars. Walking to the pharmacy and grocery store would be good exercise, I'd said. Now I saw the truth. They hadn't wanted me to have a car because it took up their precious driveway. My hands trembled as I gripped the calculator. When had I stopped being family and become their personal bank account? When had my love and generosity turned into something they felt entitled to? I count every penny just to cover your mortgage while you buy a $50,000 car, I whispered into the quiet room. Laughter floated down from upstairs. Soft, contented laughter. They were celebrating, probably raising a glass to their new toy while I sat here surrounded by proof of my own foolishness. Each bank statement told the same story. Raymond Dunsworth, loyal provider, says convenient victim. I ran my finger along the list of payments, feeling the paper give under the pressure. 18 months. This car represented 18 months of sacrifice, months of denying myself simple things so they could live comfortably. My wallet lay open beside the stack. The leather was worn thin, nearly empty. Inside sat my Medicare card and $23 in cash. Everything else I owned had been funneled into their life, their comfort, their future, one that didn't have room for me. The math didn't lie. With their combined income of $150,000 a year, they could have easily handled that mortgage without my help. They didn't need me. They used me. I wasn't family anymore. I was convenience with a pulse. I stood by the window and looked down at the car gleaming under the streetlight. Tomorrow, they'd drive to work with heated seats and leather upholstery, while I walked to the pharmacy in shoes I'd resoled twice. They'd adjust their climate control. I'd adjust my thermostat to save on gas. Somewhere along the way, I'd been playing the wrong game entirely. It hit me then. Love and exploitation can look the same on the surface. They can wear the same smile, use the same words, even call you dad with warmth in their voice. The difference is gratitude versus entitlement, respect versus dismissal, and they no longer respected me. They just expected me. The math was simple now. The math was simple now. I closed the ledger and looked up at the wall calendar. June 16th was circled in red. Father's Day, 2 months away. When that Sunday finally came, it felt heavier than the ones before. I took more care getting ready, pressed my shirt, combed my hair, even polished my shoes. Maybe today would feel different. Maybe it would remind me that I still mattered. At the top of the stairs, I paused. Voices drifted from the kitchen. Diana's voice, bright and full of energy. "Robert, happy Father's Day." Her tone hit me like sunlight after a long winter. Warm, genuine, the kind of joy I hadn't heard from her in months. "Come over tonight for dinner. We'll have your favorite pot roast and that chocolate cake you love." My chest swelled with cautious hope as I listened. Maybe today would be a turning point. She laughed softly, still on the phone. 6 o'clock will be perfect. Patricia will love the flowers I picked out. Flowers, pot roast, chocolate cake. For a moment, I let myself believe it, that today would be about family again, about something bigger than bank accounts and car payments. Maybe, just maybe, Father's Day would mean something after all. I stopped in the doorway of the kitchen and waited. I didn't want to interrupt whatever she was planning, but I positioned myself so she would have to notice me. Morning light filtered in through the blinds, glinting off her hair as she spoke animatedly, gesturing with her hands even though the person on the other end couldn't see her. "It's going to be wonderful," she said, voice glowing with pride. "A real celebration for someone who truly deserves it. Someone who deserves it." The phrase wrapped itself around me like warmth after a long winter. Maybe, after all these months of feeling like a ghost in my own home, today would remind me what it was like to be loved again. "See you tonight. Love you," she said before hanging up. I smiled quietly, letting myself believe for a second that the warmth in her voice had something to do with me. It was Father's Day, after all. My day. When she turned around, I expected her face to light up, maybe with a "Happy Father's Day," or at least something close. Instead, I got the same polite nod I'd been getting for weeks. "Good morning," she said flatly. No mention of the day, no flicker of recognition, just a businesslike greeting, the kind you give a stranger at a hotel desk. "Good morning," I answered, waiting for more. Waiting for the voice I just heard seconds ago. The laughter, the excitement, the affection. But it never came. She brushed past me toward the dining room, already on to the next task. The cheer in her voice, the love in her words, all of that had been for someone else. For Robert. For me, she had nothing but duty. I stood in the kitchen holding my empty coffee mug while she moved around, opening cabinets, clanging pans, humming softly as she prepared something special. The sounds were familiar, the rhythm of care, of celebration, but they weren't for me. Standing there, I realized what I'd been avoiding for months. In this house, there was only room for one father to be honored, and it wasn't me. I retreated to my room and sat for a while, listening to the noises downstairs. The cabinets, the pans, the soft laughter. The celebration was already taking shape, just not mine. Later, I heard the slam of car doors, followed by cheerful voices drifting in from the driveway. Curiosity pulled me from my chair. I straightened my shirt, smoothed my hair, and stepped out for the first time all day. The living room was alive with something I hadn't seen here in a long time: genuine warmth. Robert greeted me first, shaking my hand firmly, his grip strong and familiar. His palms were rough from decades in auto repair, and his smile was steady, honest. "Raymond, good to see you. It's been too long," he said. Patricia, his wife, touched my arm lightly as she looked around. "What a beautiful home you have, Raymond. It's lovely." Her admiration sounded sincere, not polite, but real. And then I watched it happen. Diana changed right in front of me. The cold, distant woman I'd grown used to disappeared, replaced by a gracious, laughing hostess. She hung on Robert's every word, poured Patricia wine, and filled the room with easy warmth. "Dad, come sit with us for dinner," she said, her tone finally carrying a hint of affection, but only for show. I could hear the performance in it, see it in the way she turned toward her guests. "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice calm and polite. I'd learned how to do that, to act the way she expected, without revealing the sting underneath. Brandon appeared from the kitchen, carrying a pair of gift bags like he was presenting trophies. His chest was puffed out, proud, ready to make an impression. The dining room table gleamed under soft light. Diana had gone all out: fine china, polished silverware, fresh flowers in a crystal vase. My place was set at the far end, neat but unremarkable. Robert's chair, though, faced the window like a throne, framed by the floral arrangement behind him. The message was clear. It always was. Dinner began with polite conversation. Robert asked me about my health, about the books I'd been reading, even baseball. Patricia talked about arthritis, offered home remedies that had helped her sister. They treated me kindly, the way family should. For a moment, I almost forgot where I was. But then I looked across the table at my daughter. The warmth she showed them, the light in her eyes, I hadn't seen that in years. She laughed at Robert's jokes, remembered details about Patricia's garden, their church, their neighborhood. She was everything a daughter should be: attentive, caring, proud. Just not to me. The pot roast was perfect, tender, seasoned, just right. I ate quietly, half listening as they traded stories. Every time the topic drifted toward money or bills, Diana steered it somewhere else: recipes, vacations, neighborhood gossip. She was protecting the illusion, making sure the mask stayed in place. Brandon played along, offering small smiles and nods at all the right moments, careful to sound humble while dropping casual hints about his success. And then it came. Before dessert, Diana stood up, a spark in her eyes I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. "Before we cut the cake," she said, "we have a surprise." She lifted her champagne glass, the crystal catching the candlelight, scattering it across the room like tiny stars. All eyes turned to her, and I realized I'd seen that look before. That same confident, proud expression she'd had when she sold my house. "Happy Father's Day, Robert." Her words rang out over the table like a toast. Then came the sound, sharp, metallic, as the car keys hit the polished wood. The noise seemed to echo through the room, bouncing off the walls until everything went still. The BMW keys, $50,000 worth of German luxury, presented like a trophy unveiling. Robert stared at them, eyes wide, his hand hovering uncertainly above the table as if the keys might detonate the second he touched them. "Diana," he stammered, this can't be right. We can't accept something like this." Patricia covered her mouth, her voice trembling. "Diana, this is far too much. We couldn't possibly take such an expensive gift." Diana just smiled, her tone bright with staged generosity. "Nonsense. You've been like real parents to me. You deserve something special." Brandon leaned in, grinning like a salesman sealing a deal. "It's already yours," he added proudly. "Titles are in your name, insurance paid up for the year." Their words filled the space like confetti, glittering and empty. $50,000, more than my entire yearly pension, more than what most families put down on a home. And they handed it over without hesitation, all smiles and champagne, to people they'd known less than a decade. Then her voice changed. "Oh, and Dad," she said, businesslike now, as if she were reminding me about taking out the trash. "The mortgage is due Sunday." Silence. The room hung suspended between crystal glasses and floral centerpieces, everyone frozen mid-breath. A $50,000 car gift, followed immediately by a mortgage reminder. The cruelty of the timing was surgical. I set my fork down gently, the metal tapping against porcelain. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, across that perfect table setting she was so proud of. Don't I deserve even a small gift? The question came out smaller than I'd planned, but every syllable carried months of quiet heartbreak and swallowed pride. 4 sets of eyes turned toward her, waiting. "No," she said. Just one word, sharp and final. The kind of word that ends chapters, no explanation, no flicker of guilt. No kindness in her tone, just the blunt honesty of someone who'd stopped pretending to care about the damage they caused. Across from her, Robert froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Patricia's wine glass trembled. Even Brandon shifted in his chair, his confidence cracking as he realized what she'd just done. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile I'd practiced many nights in the mirror, the kind a man wears when he finally accepts the truth. "Of course not," I said quietly. Then I pushed back my chair, slow and steady, letting the legs scrape across the hardwood floor. "Excuse me." The hallway stretched out in front of me like a release. Every step carried me further from their laughter, their lights, their performance. Behind me, I could hear the awkward shuffle of voices trying to fill the silence, pretending nothing important had just happened. But they knew. Everyone at that table knew. Something irreversible had shifted. I closed my bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed. Downstairs, the laughter resumed, brittle and forced, glasses clinking, the sound of people eager to forget. I stared at the blue walls of my little room, realizing they had never felt like home. At 10 o'clock, I heard car doors slam and goodbyes shouted into the night. Robert's voice floated through the window, warm and grateful, half still trying to process the generosity he'd been shown. By 11:30, the house was quiet again, the kind of silence that seeps into your bones. I didn't sleep. I sat there, thinking, the way an engineer thinks when faced with a problem. A lifetime of equations and logic had taught me how to balance inputs and outputs, to make sense of imbalance. Tonight, the math was simple. I'd given everything and received nothing. It was time to correct the equation. Around midnight, I opened the dresser drawers. Every movement was precise, practiced. Old habits from the army days. Fold tight, pack light, move clean. 2 suitcases were enough. There wasn't much to take. You don't accumulate many possessions when you live in someone else's house. From the small lockbox under the bed, I pulled the important things. Passport, social security card, bank cards, a few documents that proved I was still a person, not a payment plan. The essentials for starting over. I left behind the expensive watch Diana had given me last Christmas, the one still in its box. I'd never worn it. Even then, I'd known her gifts came with strings attached. But I took Virginia's photo. Silver frame and all, she would have understood. In truth, I think she'd been whispering this decision to me for months. Then came the note. It took longer than I expected. I wanted to get it right, to make it firm but not bitter, brief but not cruel. In the end, I wrote, "I'm gone. By the time you read this, I've stopped the mortgage payments and changed my will. I'm tired of being your bank, Raymond." I placed it on the kitchen table where they'd find it first thing in the morning, pinning it beneath the matching salt shaker Diana had been so proud of. My handwriting was steady. My signature formal. Final. It didn't look like the note of a desperate man. It looked like a closing document. At 2:30, I opened the taxi app on my phone. It said 15 minutes. Just enough time to look around one last time. Not in regret, but in relief. There was still plenty of time to finish what needed finishing. A few last looks around the house that had once promised comfort, but turned into a cage built from my own generosity. I carried each suitcase out one at a time, careful not to make a sound that might stir the family upstairs. Every step down that hallway felt easier than the one before, like I was shedding weight I'd been carrying for years. The front door clicked softly behind me. Not a slam, not a scene, just quiet. That was how freedom should sound. The taxi pulled away from the curb, merging onto the empty stretch of highway. Meadowview Motor Lodge, I told the driver. For the first time in months, I didn't have a plan for tomorrow. And for the first time in months, that uncertainty didn't scare me. It felt like breathing again. The night clerk at the motor lodge barely looked up from his crossword as I approached the counter, two suitcases rolling behind me like old dogs that refused to leave my side. At 3 in the morning, life is stripped down to its essentials. No questions, no judgment, just the exchange of credit card and key. How many nights? He asked without looking up. A week, maybe more, I said, sliding the card across the counter. He nodded, handed me a key card, and went back to his puzzle. Room 127 smelled faintly of cleaning solution and something new, maybe possibility. A single bed, a small desk, a television bolted to the wall. Modest, but mine. I hung my shirts in the narrow closet, spacing them evenly, old habits returning on autopilot. For the first time in months, I lay down without bracing for footsteps outside my door. When I woke, sunlight pushed through the curtains. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. 12 missed calls, 11 voicemails. I played the first one. Diana's voice, frantic, shaky, disbelief wrapped in panic. I turned the phone off and placed it face down in the desk drawer. This time, the silence belonged to me. Monday morning, I took a cab into downtown Lincoln. The legal district was already buzzing, people in suits, briefcases swinging, all with purpose. I felt strangely at home among them. Sharon Coleman's office sat on the 15th floor of a building that looked practical rather than proud. Efficient, solid. Exactly what I needed. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Dunsworth?" she asked, pen poised above the will modification papers. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't waver. She made her choice when she chose cruelty over kindness. The new document was simple, almost elegant. The majority of my estate would go to Virginia's church, the one where we'd been married. The rest divided between veterans organizations and the local library. Diana's name appeared nowhere. "Your daughter will receive official notice within 30 days, Sharon said as she slid the signed pages into a folder. I initialed every line page by page with the steady hand of a man putting his life back in order, not out of spite but out of balance. The ink dried quick and clean. Walking back to the motel, I felt something I hadn't felt since Virginia's funeral. Hope. Real. Quiet hope. The motor lodge didn't feel like a holding cell anymore. It felt like a starting line. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and started looking up rentals in Elkhorn, just south of Lincoln. Small houses with backyards, quiet streets, neighbors who waved but minded their own business. By evening, I crossed the street to the park with a cup of coffee and my Civil War book. The sunlight felt warmer than it had in years. A week passed in peace. Coffee at 6, breakfast at the diner next door, a walk to the park after, days stitched together with small, quiet freedoms. Then came Saturday. I was reading a biography of Eisenhower when the stillness changed. I didn't have to look up to know who was coming. You can feel desperation before you see it. Diana's Toyota came in too fast, stopping crooked across 2 parking spaces. I watched from the corner of my eye as they climbed out, their faces tight with panic, voices too loud for a place that had forgotten their noise. "Dad," she called, already crying. "Please, we were wrong. We're sorry. Come home." Her makeup was streaked, her movements jerky, all caffeine and guilt. I closed the book carefully, slipped the diner receipt between the pages to mark my place. "This isn't my home anymore, Diana," I said evenly. Brandon followed behind her, looking wrecked, hair uncombed, eyes red. "Old man, you can't just walk away. Listen, we have a mortgage." I stood, brushing off my pants. "You have a mortgage," I corrected. "I have freedom." The words landed hard. I saw it hit them both, that sudden recognition of the truth they'd been avoiding. For months, they'd convinced themselves that my help was permanent, my sacrifice endless. They'd mistaken love for obligation. Diana's voice cracked, thin with panic. "We'll change. I promise, Dad, we'll change." "We'll treat you better. We'll include you in everything," Diana said, her words tumbling out too quickly, like she was afraid silence might make the truth louder. I looked at her. Really looked. Behind the tears and trembling lip wasn't regret. It was fear. Not sorrow for what she'd done, but panic about what losing me would mean for her comfort. That difference mattered more than she could ever understand. "I'm buying a house in Elkhorn," I said evenly, watching the words sink in. "And for the first time in a long time, I'm happy." Brandon's composure cracked. His anger erupted fast, raw, like a valve giving way under pressure. "You selfish old man," he shouted. What about our investment? What about everything we planned? You made plans, I said, my voice steady as stone. Plans that used my money while treating me like I was just another bill you couldn't wait to pay off. Their eyes darted, guilty and stunned. I knew they'd found me through my bank card. Maybe even hired someone to keep watch near the motel until my habits became routine. The thought almost made me laugh. Desperation always finds a way to humiliate itself. Please, Dad, Diana said, grabbing my sleeve with both hands. Her fingers were cold, unsteady. We're family. Family doesn't threaten each other with nursing homes, I said quietly, pulling my arm away. Family doesn't buy $50,000 cars and then ask pensioners to cover their mortgage. The words hung between us like a sentence already decided. I picked up my book, met their eyes one last time, not with anger, but with something close to pity. Don't look for me again. Then I turned and walked back toward the motel. Inside, I dialed the real estate agent's number from memory. I'm ready to make an offer on that house in Elkhorn, I told her. And with that, the future began. October brought crisp mornings and clear skies, the kind of Nebraska weather that makes even yard work feel like meditation. 4 months in my own house had rebuilt a rhythm I thought was gone for good. Coffee at sunrise, hands in the dirt before noon, evening walks down streets where neighbors waved but didn't pry. The letter came on a Tuesday, tucked between the grocery flyers and electric bill. It was from Sharon Coleman, my attorney. The envelope looked ordinary. The contents did not. The foreclosure proceedings have concluded, she'd written in her perfect cursive. Your former residence was sold at auction. I thought you'd want to know. I set the letter on the kitchen table, in my kitchen, and just sat there for a while. The peace that filled that small room felt earned. Solid. They'd lost everything. All it took was 3 missed mortgage payments. Without my deposits, the house of cards collapsed faster than they ever thought possible. The BMW was the first to go, then the house itself, that place that never felt like home to begin with. According to Sharon, they were renting a small apartment across town now. Their marriage strained under a pressure they used to outsource to me. Robert and Patricia still had the car, of course, a gift freely given, not tied to manipulation or guilt. But they offered no rescue to the people who'd mistaken generosity for endless supply. Some lessons come with bills attached. Out in the yard, a cardinal had started building a nest in the maple tree I planted last month. I watched it dart back and forth, patient and sure. The bird understood something it had taken me 67 years to figure out. Independence isn't loneliness, it's peace. The tomatoes were ripening, the marigolds thriving, colors I'd chosen just because they made me smile. No one criticized how I spent my hours or questioned my choices or treated me like an inconvenience in my own home. Sometimes the phone rang, telemarketers mostly, or a neighbor inviting me to a cookout or a church event. I answered when I felt like talking. Let it ring when I didn't. Small freedoms, learned slowly. I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup in the sink, and stepped outside into the garden. The air smelled like autumn and soil and new beginnings. There was still work to do before winter came, and for the first time in years, I wanted to do it. They'd lost everything, and I'd finally found peace. Lesson learned. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.